And coming up next, well, we all recognise this voice, don't we?
Boxing really calls on you being upfront and honest with yourself. It makes good people who actually get involved with boxing, because you have to be considerate to be good. Bullies don't do anything in boxing. Bullies get beaten very quickly and get out of the game. Strong people are considerate people, and considerate people make good champions.
Well, that is, of course, Chris Eubank, but £31,000 worth of dental work, and apparently the famous Lisp has gone. Let's find out. Good evening, Chris Eubank.
How do you do? Yes, it has absolutely gone. Now I have a whistle, something of which will never be able to be impersonated, because the comedians just aren't out there. This is going to take a very decent skill set to actually reproduce. It's quite sexy as well.
Chris, you're talking to Steve Bunce now, so let's cut the sexy stuff. Chris, it seems to me that you've only slightly replaced the whisk with that kind of that whisk with that whistle. What's going on?
Well, the whistle actually cannot be, as I say, impersonated. 1 and 2 is something that people can't actually take lightly. A lisp is always kind of looked upon almost childlike, and isn't taken seriously. A whistle is sexy, and it cannot really be criticised because it can't be impersonated. It's always an absolute pleasure.
Listen, Mike Costello is listening to you in Berlin as well. Mike, can you believe what you're hearing from Chris?
No, I can't. Chris, why?
Why? Listen, Winston Churchill before me, Darwin before him, didn't like their lists, and neither did I. And now it's gone. Good riddance. And I so wish I would have done this 11 years ago. And who's responsible for it is a fellow called Dr. Barry Buckley in Ireland. He is simply the best.
So have you been carrying this like a burden then for so long? Huh?
No, I wouldn't say a burden. It's just been part of... it's been part of me, I guess. And a lot of people say, well, you know, it's something you shouldn't have really lost because it was part of you. Well, to that I'd say, well, I had the truck, or I still have the truck, I had the jumpers, the cane. I have many things which are synonymous with my name. And so the fact that the list is gone, I am ecstatic. And my father, when he was alive, he used to drink quite a bit, and when he drank, he whistled in his speech. And it's like someone's, when I listen to myself, it's almost as though someone's like poking me gently in the ribs. It makes me feel nice.
Chris, let me ask you this: what exactly did this great dental surgeon Barry Buckley do to correct your lisp and turn it into the sexy Eubank whistle, which I've got to tell you is growing on me as we're talking? So what exactly did Mr. Buckley do, Chris?
Well, I suppose he has given me the perfect smile. So there's no longer a gap between my teeth. But because of the fact that I had 2 of my front teeth removed through pugilistic dallying, there is a little bit of a kind of like a inverted gap at the top of my palate, where the teeth were, and that's now creating this whistle. So every time I pronounce this S, it whistles rather than
lisping.
Rather than lisps. Yeah, so it's rather it's you know, it's very cool. It's and you know, I suppose Steve, you've known me long enough. I'm not one that is self-effacing. Whenever I've done something in the public eye which projects as being flamboyant, it's really always done to entertain. This is something that I truly like. It's wonderful. It's fabulous.
Chris, you clearly care about how you present yourself. I remember reading in your autobiography that you used to listen to the BBC World Service to help you articulate what you wanted to say. Is that right?
Indeed. But when I was learning to box in the United States, what tended to happen is when I was in school in the daytime, all the people who spoke their broken English, which was an American slang, they all spoke incorrectly. For instance, they'd say, "Where you at?" I always corrected that in my own mind, which was, "Where are you?" Not "where you at." So my English, along with listening to the BBC World Service and listening to how incorrectly the New Yorkers spoke, actually bettered my English to where now people think I've been academically educated. And I haven't. I've really learned from the school of hard knocks.
Chris, you've got to do a new book one day. I mean, a slightly meatier and grislier version of your life story, because the first 20 years of your life really need to be. I know you and I have talked about this, and I might be airing private stuff in public, but you've got to sit down and redo the first 20 years again, mate.
Well, I think absolutely. As I've said to you, when that does happen, I would like you to be the person to ghostwrite it, so you can talk about the things that I didn't really see because I was doing them. You see, while you're performing and while you're being the person in the public eye or the person who's being attacked by the critics, it's better if someone accounts of what happened from their point of view, because from my point of view, I was just being me.
Yeah.
But from your point of view,
you're taking more in.
Well, yes. It's like getting married. When you get married, you basically say your vows. You get married, everybody else enjoys the crack.
Chris, before we let you go in, mate, and I'll do an hour with you if I have my way. What are you doing at the moment? Because what's next for you? What's coming up in the next few months, 6 months of your life?
I'm working with David Lloyd. David Lloyd is the person who's put together the leisure centres. I'm in partnership with him, and we are launching. Well, I am launching with him, I guess. Slim Gems. I'm around 14 stones 2. I have obviously a great deal of experience with weight loss.
Yep.
So these Slim Gems are going to be very, proactive in terms of actually getting people's weights down. And within these gymnasiums, there's going to be my ethos, which is to conduct yourself in a way which is charming.
Chris, listen, you've lost none of your charm and none of your personality with losing your lisp. It's great to have you on the show. Thanks so much for being with us.
It's always an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
See you, Chris.
That's Chris Eubank. Chris Eubank without the lisp. Great to have him with us, and he was on the train as well. So we managed to get the very best before he went into another tunnel. Mike, you almost forget, don't you? You know, with all the hype and all the pantomime that surrounded Chris over the last few years, what a great fighter he really was.
Well, a hard man. You know, the fight against Michael Watson that you feel you're almost not allowed to talk about was a night when he showed almost immeasurable courage when he was being beaten by Michael Watson and came out with an uppercut in the 11th round, you know, the round before the fateful one. You know, that took so much courage to produce, and he showed that so often through his career. I remember an electric night at the National Exhibition Centre in Birmingham when he fought Nigel Benn the first time round.
We sat together.
And that was so explosive, and it seemed every time each of them hit each other that they would go down, and they rebounded, and eventually it was Ben that buckled. He just had so much heart and such a granite chin as well. He brought, you know, he brought different elements to the ring. He wasn't the silkiest, he wasn't the most skillful, but you know, when he was in big and he was in tough, you knew it was going to be a great night.
Yeah, there was something exceptional. Obviously, the September 21st at White Hart Lane 2001, the Watson rematch, Mike, that stands out. But if you actually look at the record, I had a brief look before we came on air, there's about another 10 or 12 fights, and sometimes you forget them. The 2 fights with Carl Thompson. There were 2 fights with Ben, remember? There were 42,000 people at the Theatre of Dreams in 1993. This guy carried carried British boxing for nearly a decade.
And he'd gone up in weight against Thompson, hadn't he, and took some cannons from him as well.
Staggering,
it was amazing that night.
The
yeah.
Kawasaki night 13 years ago, he carried boxing. Naz was a sideshow attraction. Lennox was a big international star, but this guy carried it for a decade. And in my opinion, modern British boxing owes this kid or this man, this great man, this sexy voice man, a debt.
To the end of his career, Joe Kawasaki said that night he won the title against Chris Eubank was the hardest of his night. The first time he'd ever been taken, he said, into the trenches, as warned by Eubank at the press conference.
Listen, guys.